You guys, I'm here with Gypsy Rose herself, the celeb of the moment. So I know you have so many followers, so much love on social media. But what I want to know is, what do you have to say to the haters?
Well, you know, can't bring me down. I'm on a high right now. I'm living my best life, and y'all can't take that from me.
We have a lot to talk about on Crime Light today. Hey everybody, welcome in. So Gypsy Rose has been released from prison for less than a month already, and she has beat out another prisoner who rose to fame, Jelly Roll, who sits at a whopping 2 million followers, as Gypsy Rose has one of the biggest social media followings in the world. 8 million and counting. And she continues to work on her television appearances, cutting a book deal, and talking about starting a family. Meanwhile, her ex Nicholas sits to do his time, what I'm going to consider rot, in prison with fleeting hopes of an appeal. Nicholas has said he did it for love, and Gypsy Rose says she wishes him the best as she has found love and is moving on to help others. I'm going to brief the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard so we can get a basic understanding of what's going on here. And then the final half of this release will be my opinion, if I'm on board with where this is all going and if the actual murderer is serving justice fairly. And what do I think about the man Gypsy speaks of when she says,
and the D is
Fire!
I'm Chelsea J. Welcome to Crime Light. As probably most of you know, I have a podcast called Crime Light, the podcast, and you can find it on Apple and Spotify. Exclusive content there that is actually not here on YouTube. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was raised by her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, who consistently fabricated health issues for her daughter, resulting in numerous medical diagnoses and interventions. However, Gypsy was not actually ill. Her mother had been deceiving others about her daughter's well-being. The story about Gypsy and her mother only surfaced when she arranged for her online boyfriend to murder Dee Dee in 2015. I'm talking about Gypsy. Gypsy arranged for her mother's murderer in meeting her boyfriend, Nicholas. So let's just get that out there right now. Born in 1991, Gypsy Rose was just an infant when Dee Dee falsely claimed that her daughter suffered from sleep apnea. As Gypsy reached the age of 8, Dee Dee continued to fabricate her medical conditions, including leukemia, muscular dystrophy, which resulted in her needing a wheelchair and a feeding tube. Dee Dee's list of supposed health issues for Gypsy grew to include seizures, asthma, and impairments in vision, as well as hearing. This led to Gypsy being prescribed numerous medications and having to use a breathing machine while asleep. She also underwent several surgeries, such as eye procedures and removal of her salivary glands. Sadly, Gypsy's teeth eventually deteriorated, possibly due to the medications, lack of salivary glands, and neglect, resulting in their extraction. Yet the truth was that Gypsy could walk, she did not need a feeding tube, and she didn't actually have cancer. Her head was bald only because Dee Dee Blanchard, her mother, shaved off her hair. We all have the same question to this day as a society, as a nation. How did a mentally ill woman like Dee Dee pull one over on these doctors? Dee Dee would stop seeing any doctors who questioned her daughter's well-being, basically questioning Dee Dee. However, Dee Dee was struggling with something called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which means that a caregiver or someone that's raising another person, their child, usually the caregiver or the mother, the parent, finds an issue, a health issue within their patient or their child that really just isn't there. Dee Dee also had a very difficult upbringing as well. We're not going to get too much into that. It's really important to know because that's what's fair for Gypsy. Gypsy was dealing with a very mentally ill mother, and she was paying the price for it ever since she came into the world. Dee Dee was taking great advantage of Gypsy because Dee Dee had a lot of control and a lot of people manipulated about Gypsy. Dee Dee's wishes were followed by many caregivers. She possessed some nursing knowledge, enabling her to accurately portray symptoms, and would sometimes administer medications to Gypsy to stimulate certain illnesses. Furthermore, Dee Dee's charm and unwavering dedication to her daughter were evident. As Gypsy grew older, Dee Dee instructed her to refrain from disclosing any information during their appointments, as she was always the one to speak up on Gypsy's behalf and fabricated Gypsy's medical history. Dee Dee told Gypsy's father, Rod Blanchard, that their daughter had a disorder that had led her to many health issues. He complimented Dee Dee for her devoted care. When some of Dee Dee's family noticed things were seemingly off about Gypsy and weren't necessarily taking Dee Dee's word for things, Dee Dee and Gypsy moved away. So Dee Dee was very much isolating Gypsy from others, so that way they wouldn't catch on to her dirty act. But we are dealing with a woman that is mentally ill. Like, she really is fabricating these things and what I believe, believing them. Dee Dee claimed to be a victim of Hurricane Katrina, so she and Gypsy received assistance to relocate from Louisiana to Missouri in 2005. There, Dee Dee continued to bring Gypsy to doctor's appointments. Hurricane Katrina also provided an excuse for missing medical files, so this obviously leaned into Dee Dee's favor. Even when Gypsy was a teenager, Dee Dee still claimed that Gypsy was sick and began to lie about Gypsy's age to make Gypsy younger than she was. Through this fabricated lifestyle, Gypsy and Dee Dee were also granted exclusive attendance to music shows and Disney World. Throughout it all, Dee Dee persisted to receive attention for being such a devoted and loving caregiver. When Gypsy was 14, she saw a neurologist in Missouri who came to believe that she was a victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. This doctor started to believe that Dee Dee was sick and not telling the truth about Gypsy's condition. However, this doctor never ended up reporting anything because this doctor thought that they didn't have enough evidence to do it. In 2009, an anonymous report was made to authorities about Dee Dee falsifying medical diagnosis of her daughter Gypsy. 2 visits had been made to the home by CPS, but Dee Dee charmed the workers out of believing anything that was reported against her were true. Now, as Gypsy began to age, Dee Dee resorted to fabricating her daughter's birth date on official documents in an attempt to portray her as younger than she actually was. However, Gypsy's rebellious nature continued to challenge Dee Dee's authorities. In 2011, Gypsy tried to get away from her mother by running away with a man she'd met at a science fiction convention. But Dee Dee soon tracked them down via mutual friends. Dee Dee convinced the man that took Gypsy that Gypsy was a minor, although at the time, Gypsy was actually 19. Gypsy was hit by Dee Dee, physically hit, and denied food, alongside getting her computer taken as consequences. And Gypsy would go on to say she didn't even have bathroom rights. So it's a very sad situation. And I can only imagine that Gypsy is feeling extremely helpless. Gypsy eventually managed to get back online. In 2012, she joined a Christian dating site where she met Nicholas Godejohn, who had autism spectrum disorder and dissociative identity disorder. Nicholas had spent most of his life in special education classes, alone, and he had no friends. And it sounds like Nicholas couldn't hold a job because when he met Gypsy, he didn't have one. He spent much of his time isolated and online. When Gypsy told the truth to Nicholas about Dee Dee, Gypsy actually requested of Nicholas to murder her mother, Dee Dee. One of the things that Nicholas ends up mentioning is that they were in a sexting kind of relationship online, and Gypsy was starting to get into what Nicholas called a little too much BDSM. That she was getting a little wild on her side, and that she kind of did these sexual things, okay? See the picture? Where she was mixing violence with the idea of fantasy. Nicholas and Gypsy would end up dressing up at one point as comic book characters, and in this picture of Gypsy, she is actually supposed to be Harley Quinn, and she's posing with a weapon. Now, Nicholas, at some point or another, did end up talking about his many different sides to him. And at the time, Gypsy would create sides of herself to match sides of Nicholas. Nicholas was kind of pretending he was splitting, like he had all these different parts of who he was. And Gypsy sort of mirrored what he was and who he thought he was, and she created sides to herself to love the sides of himself as well. But even now, to this day, it's not really clear why Nicholas participated in this scheme. He had no history of violence. His only prior arrest was for a lewd conduct in 2013 at a McDonald's where he had been watching porn on a tablet. I'm just gonna notate this right here real fast. Gypsy was actually a thief. She stole baby clothes and other things in reference to having a baby from Walmart because she was insinuating having children with Nick. And she also stole the knife that was used on her mother Dee Dee from Walmart too. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it actually gets held against Nick in the media that he was caught doing what he was doing on his tablet in the McDonald's parking lot. But if Gypsy had been caught stealing, she would have also gotten a conviction too. So it doesn't matter how big the sin is here. Both people did something wrong. Nick got caught and she didn't. But moving along, the next year, she arranged and paid, stole a lot of money. Like in her court appearance, she said 800 to 1,000 and beyond for Nick to meet her mother. Her plan was for him to just casually bump into Dee Dee while she and Dee Dee were at the movie theater, and then later for her to introduce Nick to her mother. As soon as they did meet in person for the first time in March of 2015, when Gypsy Rose, along with her mother, when they went to watch Cinderella, Nick says Gypsy Rose led him to the bathroom of the handicap stall where the two ended up getting intimate for the first time. In June of 2015, he came to her house and stabbed Dee Dee while Gypsy waited, ears covered, in the bathroom. And afterward, it said that they had some pretty hot and heavy intimacy. Now, I want to make mention that the plan was actually all Gypsy's idea. She provided the gloves that Nick wore from her home. She always gave Nick the money to travel. She stole the knife from Walmart, and she was the one that came up with all the planning. Everything regarding Dee Dee's death was Gypsy Rose's idea. They had 3 plans before they actually came to this conclusion. Plan A was for Gypsy and Nick to meet each other at the movies. When they were to meet, and Dee Dee was to be introduced to Nick, Gypsy and Nick were going to fall in love for the first time, and she was hoping that her mother Dee Dee would permit her to have a boyfriend, but it didn't work out because Dee Dee was very controlling and she just didn't like Nick. Plan B was for Gypsy to get pregnant, which is why she started stealing all that stuff from Walmart. They were thinking about getting tied together for ever through having a baby. That was her grand escape, to use another human, her child, and Nick to be able to break away and grow into a mother and spend the rest of her life with Nick. And then there was Plan C, which was to just completely off Dee Dee. They took $4,000 in cash that Dee Dee had been keeping in the house, mostly from Rod's child support checks. This was Gypsy's father, if we remember. They fled to a motel outside of Springville, where they stayed a few days while planning their next move. I read that Nick actually had a meltdown at some point when they got to the motel that they were staying at, and that Gypsy was comforting him and reminding him that this was her idea and not his, and that there was no reason for him to feel bad about what he had done. Gypsy and Nick ended up returning to Nick's home in Wisconsin, where they were found by police. Gypsy had twice posted to the Facebook account that she shared with her mother Dee Dee, writing this: "That bee is dead." She and Nicholas were soon extradited and held on a $1 million bond. In 2016, Gypsy pled guilty to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison and served 85% of her sentence before being released on December 28th of 2023, which was literally less than a month ago. Nicholas, on the other hand, was found guilty of first-degree murder in 2018, and he was sentenced to life in prison. What Gypsy had to say of her ex Nicholas was, she is saying that she wishes him well in doing his time, but she's on a new path of life now and will continue to focus on that path going forward. These are her words, not mine. This isn't even an opinion. This is actually a statement from Gypsy, like, I'm on my path, he's on his. Good luck, Nicholas. I'm going forward. Today, Gypsy is physically healthy. When asked by Dr. Phil if she was glad her mother was dead, she stated, "I'm glad that I'm out of that situation, but I'm not happy that she's dead." Gypsy ended up marrying her husband, Ryan Scott Anderson, while she was still in prison for the murder of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. Now, there's a whole story about it, how they met, and he was there for her during the pandemic and just all kinds of things. I actually have nothing against the husband, Ryan. He seems like he is trying to be a present husband and cope with things the best that he can for his wife. All of their love life is everywhere. You can't miss it. It's about the only thing that keeps making headlines over and over again besides Taylor Swift and that football player. What we are supposed to be doing currently is supporting the headlines, clicking on the news broadcastings of Gypsy and her husband and her new life and all those things, making people more rich on it, and believing that this is happily ever after and that, that chapter for Gypsy has just completely closed. So that's where we're at with the media and the story. So here's what I'm thinking. We have a big problem here. There's a huge disconnect going on. We are pushing it to be acceptable and normal to glamorize someone who is an accomplice to murder and shift blame fully on a special needs human. Psychologist Dr. Kent Franks testified that Nicholas has autism spectrum disorder level 2. Do you guys remember the story of the Titan submersible and the autistic son, Brian Saz, going to that Blink-182 concert, and he made a flirty remark toward an OnlyFans model on Twitter, and oh my god, the nation reacted harder on it than the actual accident of the submersible imploding? We judged him. We spit on his name. How could he do that?
Thanks for the love and the support. Here are the facts, okay? Believe it or not, I have about $100 to my name. I can't go out to the ocean. I can't get on a flight. I don't have a passport. I was sitting here yesterday watching the news for 2 days straight. I go to a Blink-182 show because they have a ticket. It wasn't like I was having super fun. It wasn't like I was celebrating, having a great time. I was kind of just listening to some of my all-time favorite songs, kind of like nodding my head and just trying to get off the phone for maybe 2 hours or so. So that's the truth.
I was actually one of the only ones that was actually in that guy's corner. I actually did a video on it and it's still up because I don't have the heart to take it down. And I don't know, I guess I'm one of the only few that's really gonna have to take a stand for Nicholas here because my life is actually autism spectrum level 2. You see, my son has this. Autism spectrum disorder, also known to be ASD, it's a developmental disorder that affects communication and behavior. People with ASD may behave, communicate, interact, and learn in ways that are different from most other people. There are 3 levels. Level 1 means on the spectrum with some autistic tendencies. Level 2 requires substantial support with severe challenges in social communication, such as limited verbal and nonverbal skills, reduced interest in social interactions, and difficulty coping with change. And level 3 requires a very substantial amount of support. As a mother of level 2 autism, that would be an entirely new video, but I'll just tell you that it doesn't go away. It doesn't fix. It's something that goes on forever. And I myself have exhausted every single avenue available in the state of California to ensure that my son is gonna be okay in his life. Some examples here. He has 7 teams in California, and each team has about 2 to 7 people within those teams. 3 different doctors. He's on his 4th diagnosis. We've been through 2 therapy services and headed into a 3rd. He's tried 2 different schools. He is on an IEP plan in school. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg to start a conversation about level 2 autism. And so Nicholas has level 2 autism, and I wanted you to know something. Autistic people are not the majority of murderers. How often do you hear of autistic people going to prison? Prison is not going to fix anyone with autism. So Gypsy could be brainwashed to play sick, to keep the peace with her mother and to be the best daughter possible, to keep the peace in the home. But I believe that Nicholas was also brainwashed by Gypsy. Gypsy delivered a plan to Nicholas, and she was coherent enough to do so. Traumatized, yes, but she was coherent. Nicholas wasn't. Autistic people are actually prone more to do what is asked of them, especially if they are manipulated to, because they think differently. Like, autistic people need guidance. Nicholas would come out and say, I wish I would have known it was more manipulation than love, because if I had actually known that, I probably would not have been in this situation that I'm in. Due to my disability, it's pretty easy for me to be deceived. So Nicholas is not lying, and I'm not lying. It's science. These people think like they are much younger than they really are. Let's not forget that Nicholas had a very low IQ, like extremely low. Most people that are autistic actually have very high IQs, like example, Christine Barnett's son Jacob from the Natalia Grace story. So Christine Barnett's son Jacob was a genius with his autism. But remember how he was a grown man living in his dad's basement like a teenager would? And we could sit here all day and be like, but he was a genius. Like, a genius can't figure out how to pay his bills and live in a better condition. He's a genius. Like, what? Really? Yes, really. Because autism doesn't work that way. Nicholas in this story here needs substantial support. Autism is just different. You know who's not different though? Gypsy Rose. Turns out Gypsy was able to actually get out of her wheelchair and be healthy enough to get married, unlike some of these people with disabilities. You know, we're all kind of hot and heavy on her past, and we're really, oh, that's so sad for her. Look, she obviously figured it out. How often do you get to find out that you don't have cancer, you can walk, you can get married, you can be normal and happy? Almost never. Like, that's why this story is so big. It's just not a thing. So hell yeah, that's exciting news. That's why the story is so captivating, and honestly, the story should stay captivating for that purpose. But unfortunately, Hollywood has now gotten involved. And they've taken the innocence away from Gypsy and her story and her time to be happy and feel good in her own body with her husband, and to know that she can walk and to be able to really comb her hair that her mother always used to take that from her. Instead of Dee Dee, Hollywood now has control over Gypsy's mind. They've set her up in this world to think that this is a safe and secure way of life, to just walk out of your front door and that the paparazzi will love you and accept you and that you're a bit of a hero. The media is purposefully painting Nicholas to be the big monster, the big heathen here. They're looking at a disabled guy on Nick and they're spitting on him. Rotten prison, Nick, but oh, Gypsy, you. And she's eating it up. And in my opinion, so is some of her family a little bit. I think and believe that the treatment of what's happening with Gypsy is very much stemming from a place of pity still, from all that she went through. And the drive of acting out like this, like clapping back and talking about things she shouldn't be talking about so openly, I think the drive for that is money, security, pity and money. Pity from the past, money for the future. My biggest problem here is that the guy who did this, Nick, how there seems to be a big downplay on why he did this and a big downplay on his diagnosis, but a really big attention scandal going on for how heroic Gypsy is for sitting in the bathroom and letting this happen and using Nick as her grand escape. She orchestrated it and somehow she comes out on top. It's unrealistic for one, and for another, it's really not fair.
She told me everything. She told me her mom abused her, made her shave all her hair off. She could walk. She told me all that stuff. I wanted to make sure her mom was not going to harm her anymore. I made sure of that.
Last week, Nick's attorney filed an appeal for a new trial. In his last trial, he argued that his mental state did not meet the requirements for first-degree murder. His public defender, Tyler Coyle, actually said this. They're saying that really he should have been found on second-degree murder. So back to that. So Nick needs not to be in society because, you know, he's guilty. He did kill someone. But I don't believe that prison is for him. And I do believe that it does need to be brought down to second degree. I am a supporter of that. One could argue that Gypsy was actually in her right mind because she doesn't have a diagnosis and that he wasn't because he does. But look, it didn't turn out that way. I get it, but I don't think that Nick was sane enough to know what he was doing. There's a doctor that is arguing with the autism thing right now regarding Nick, and he's like, oh no, when I talked to Nick, he seemed fine. Well, okay, but the psychologist that evaluated Nick evaluated him for 11 hours. Like, honestly, personal note here, our longest diagnosis has been about 3 hours. Same spectrum level. 11 is really extensive.
And as for me, I honestly, to this day, I still feel guilty about it.
Okay.
I do.
Right.
Because I learned so much about her mom after she told me and more about it after actually being able to live with her for a little while.
Right.
I actually realized how great of a mom she was.
Okay, so it kind of makes you feel a little guilty.
No. I feel a lot more guilt than that.
Did you see how literal he was? That you feel a little bit guilty. He's like, oh no, I feel more guilty than that. Thank you. That's an example of autism. And it makes me very sad because Gypsy's past gets a little bit of a free pass because she was tortured by her mother's abuse. But I personally feel for Nick and his past too, because for him, Gypsy was like his best friend. She became the love of his life. He said he would do anything for her and never would have done this if she hadn't kind of made him feel responsible to save her.
Yes, sir.
When this whole thing happened, like I've said it before in my statements, it's very much the truth, so I'll just say it again. When this whole thing happened, all I ever really wanted to be is with Blanchard. That's all I ever wanted to be. I've never known what it was like to have a motherly love. I've never known what it's like to have a female connection. I've never known any of that. None of it. Because I've never known it, that's part of the reason why I strive so hard to get it. So much to the point where I don't even understand what it even feels like to have a female connection. It's missing. It's a missing link. It's always been a missing link. It's always been one. And that's the reason why, I guess, when I got so deep into this situation where I fell in love so deeply, they do say, and they've always said it, love is blind. They've always said that. Well, I'll admit it, I was blindly in love. That was always very much the case. It was always that way. So, I understand that you're a fair judge. I've heard it from both my parents. And all I ask is just for mercy, please.
Is what?
Mercy of any form. That's all I ask.
I really think in my mind that he was, I really think, I think he was a little bit brainwashed to keep a friend. I think that he really wanted her to stay in his life because it's lonely. It's a lonely place to be when people don't understand you. So when you find someone that does, I think they were a little codependent on each other. So it is what it is. Gypsy is living a very lavish lifestyle at the moment, and okay, that's where we stand. But I'm also actually worried for Gypsy. Gypsy didn't get a normal childhood, and that's sad. My opinion is that it will not change. She can't get that time back, and that's super not fair. That is wicked, and it torments me to think about how much trauma she had to live through every day of her life. Only in my imagination can I understand for her. And factually, she was a potential target to death because her mother's mental illness was kind of slowly killing her, like taking this healthy child and belittling her and making her small and keeping her smaller. It's gross, and I'm sorry to Gypsy. But the thing is, Gypsy has 2 decades of trauma, and she's only spent 8 years in prison. She said herself that prison was the most freeing experience she's ever had, but she's also expressed that she didn't always feel like she belonged there for the 8 years, which, I'm just gonna be honest, I think somebody started telling her that in prison. Somebody was telling her, you shouldn't be here. How else would she know the difference? If you can't even know the difference of your mother doing right from wrong to you and that it's right to go to the police and wrong to murder, then how would you suddenly go to prison where you're the safest you've ever been and just suddenly know that no, you shouldn't be here? People started telling her that. She was already getting groomed to think that, she was a little bit above prison, and then she came out and she kind of talked very nicely of prison And then now she's living a very nice life. So my thing is, for Gypsy, it's almost like a rebirth for her. Now that she's out, she is 3 years younger than myself. She's 32. And I just personally feel like she's like a little baby deer learning how to get up on her legs and how to walk again. And you know, even her biological dad is now back in her life, and he's super grateful for it. And he said it's like a rebirth for him too. It's all just so new. I feel like Gypsy's lived 3 lives. One in Dee Dee's home, one in prison, and I think she's back. I think she's on her 3rd life now. She's starting all over again. The thing is, as soon as she gets out of prison, her husband has already hooked her up with social media accounts, and one of the first things they did was they went to a hotel room and they consummated their marriage. And then she had a really large meltdown when she goes home and she's asked to leave the state. Gypsy's caught on camera sobbing, like isolating herself in a room and telling the camera, I feel like I'm not free and I'm in another form of prison right now. And she was so bummed that she couldn't meet Taylor Swift and go to a football game and stay put. Well, that's a mindset. To me, that's just her trauma lashing out or talking. I was imprisoned with Dee Dee, then in prison, and now I'm asked to leave, and now I'm in prison again. No, you're not. You're definitely free. Nick is not, but you are. You had a family that rented a house for you near the prison with a huge tree and countless gifts and goodies waiting for you, with a family that loves you enough to do anything for you, marry you in prison, love you through this time.
Wow. That was cool. That was good. I do not feel free right now. I feel like I am in a different form of prison.
Yeah, the fact that she's already calling her first few days out, I'm in prison, I think that's a frame of mind. And it really doesn't help that we have people like Amanda Knox coming forward and saying the same thing, like her mom should have died and she's in prison out here. These women might need a little more therapy. But as far as Ryan, her husband, and Gypsy, there's a lot of pressure for these people to be the latest, biggest celeb couple, if you ask me, because wherever they go, they're being chased around by the media. And, you know, they're actually welcoming it. Like this statement here, just take a minute and just read it for yourself. Something about the D is fire, and then her husband says, come get it, baby. Why would you even say that? I don't need to know how your sex life is. What I want to know is that you're going to be okay and that your husband's going to be okay. Interviews are asking her the most absurd things. Like whatever we can do in Hollywood to keep her in the front of our minds. Like, what do you eat? They're asking her what she eats. Why do I need to know that? Is she into fitness? How is that going to benefit me or even her to tell us what she eats? What do you and Ryan do when the cameras are off? Then she tells us everything. Well, now it's not off camera anymore, is it? And also, why do I need to know what you and your husband are doing at all times? Ryan is actually said to be a pretty private guy. He is nervous with all the media and the cameras. He has come out to say that. He's like, I'm not used to this. Ryan is said to have worked with special needs kids. And I don't think that he is as of now, because his wife is now a celebrity from prison. But, you know, Gypsy's called him her emotional backboard, crediting him for keeping her calm. That when the pandemic happened and they met each other, that she was very emotional, and she credits him for stabilizing her. Okay, seems a little codependent to me. And I don't know about Gypsy. She seems really like a neat person, to be honest with you, but there's still something there that I'm not sure about. She wants to continuously be remembered for the suffering in her childhood, and at the same time, she's gonna clap back and talk about her husband's private size. Now, Ryan and Gypsy are said to start planning a family in the near future. Not like in the moment, but it's in discussion. So this is Gypsy's words. She said, she's been asked, whenever someone says, do you think that because of what you went through, you're gonna do that to your own kids? And Gypsy says, you know what? Absolutely not. I've learned what not to do. Okay, but Gypsy, do you know what to do when that time comes? You don't just figure things out on what not to do. You have to learn how things work. Then things can get accomplished. I just personally think like some of the statements she's making and the way she's acting, it's kind of like a teenager, also a fish out of water right now. I think it's gonna take her a while to adjust to the real world, and I hope that when the cameras die down and all of this winds down and Hollywood pulls back and goes to the newest and shiniest news, which, you know, that's gonna happen. She's keeping the news entertained and alive, but when it all starts to fade away and a news story becomes more important than her story, God, I hope her husband is as patient as he says he is.
Gypsy can say some hardcore stuff when she wants to. She's got a bite and she can get jealous, and she likes to make me jealous on occasion because there are people who want to be with Gypsy, and she gets letters and emails.
I have said I don't think that you are enough. I might want more. I might want freedom to date around. I would tell him things that I knew would hurt him.
I hope she transitions okay. I hope that their marriage is strong to last in privacy. I hope she does successfully take her life and story and use it to help others in some way. She has my hope. Don't expect Hollywood to challenge her on what her goal of helping people really means. We ask her what she eats, and we root for her when she talks about her husband being good in bed. We're not asking Gypsy the right questions. Her response to the media tells me that. We aren't asking Gypsy Rose the right questions about what she's doing with her life. Not what she's eating, not how her sex life is, but like the real questions she needs to be asked. Hollywood isn't doing that. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time, and I will be seeing you next week for another case. I'm Chelsea J. Crime Light out.
Dressed in women's lingerie, blood stains, the charge remains. A poor bastard that blew out his brains. I see it every day.